Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to the Dadhood podcast. And today's an episode that many of those who are regular listeners like yourselves have been requesting, which is to kind of explore this topic of what's going on in schools at the moment with the changes of legislation in terms of what they can teach when it comes to religion, sex education, relationships. And so I brought in the right person for that, who heads up an organization which particularly tackles that. I'm going to leave the whole introduction to the organization and to him, and who he is to himself, inshallah. But we're going to go into that mainly, but also dive into some more topics about himself, his own journey of fatherhood, and also what it means to be a dad in the household, inshallah. So, welcome to the podcast, Yusuf. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, I'm well.
Good, alhamdulillah. Thanks for joining us. I know you've been very, very busy on the circuit as of late, trying to, grab parents' attention, get them to really understand the importance of being involved in their children's schooling life and how to have a positive impact in that direction. So I thank you for taking your time out to kind of speak to us about this. And inshallah, it's going to be very fruitful. Before we get into the deep dive stuff, the first thing that we always ask our guests on the podcast is, how many children do you have, and how old were you when you became a father? You can answer it as you
Yes,
like, in any order that you like, inshallah.
yes, Alhamdulillah, I have 5 children.
Alhamdulillah.
And I was 28 when I just turned 28, just a few months into the 28 when I had my first son. Yeah.
Alhamdulillah, that's amazing. So you're down the road with 5 children now. So clearly there's been this you've got this level of experience, mashallah, of younger fathers like myself, definitely. In terms of like the age gap, how old is your oldest and how young is your youngest?
So my eldest son is coming up to 18. So in January, inshallah, he'll be 18. And then my youngest is 5. She'll be 6 next month, inshallah.
Okay.
I mean, in between that, my daughter is 7, just coming up to 16. My son below that is 13, and my son below that is 10, coming up to 11. And then, as I said, my youngest daughter is nearly 6.
Mashallah. Do you remember the day that you first became a father?
Yeah, and the thing is, sometimes and I think lots of people express this to, especially fathers. Sometimes we, and it becomes a cliche. You say, "I just don't know where the time has gone." Like you think, like it seems like yesterday, literally yesterday, rather than yesterday in the metaphorical sense. So I remember it was back in 2006, January 2006, when my son was first born, and I know you would speak to people, you say, I can't believe that that nearly 18 years has passed, because it doesn't feel like that.
SubhanAllah. Uh, when when you were 28-year-old Yusuf, did you kind of expect you were going to have the journey you had with fatherhood?
No, one of my favorite. I use this phrase, this statement in some of my presentations sometimes, but actually, to me, it's very personal. I say, and it's taken from a quotation, but I've amended it to reflect my own journey. I say, before I had children, I had 5 theories about parenting. Now I've got 5 children and no theories. And sometimes, I remember, even before marriage, even before having children, I had, you read some books, and you also get into your mind some notions around what it is you're going to do. And sometimes you fool yourself, and you think, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, it's going to turn out like that. But then you deal with children who are people, and all of my 5 children are very, and anybody with lots of children will not realize that even more than one child will tell you that they're all very different. And one thing works with one child doesn't work with another child, and some things you try different things out, you test different things out, and you make lots of mistakes along the way, and then you learn. Hopefully, inshallah, you learn something, and sometimes you make the same mistakes again. So it's you have this theoretical approach to parenting initially, where you think this is what I'm going to do, but then when you come into the reality, the nitty gritty of actual daily life with its daily problems, with other people, other human beings who have different emotional responses, different intellectual responses, and you realize actually that a lot of what you fooled yourself into thinking doesn't work, and you just have to base it upon just real life, yeah.
What was one of the biggest challenges where you definitely noticed that, okay, you're here, right now with this challenge, well, this theory I kind of just have to throw out the window and just have to address what's in front of me?
I don't know. I think it's generally generally um, recognizing that different children have like for example, um, with my with my son, my eldest son, I could tell him off. I could say to him, look, don't do that. He may huff and puff, but he'll respond. But with my daughter, if I do that, I for days I'm gonna suffer the consequences of that. Different people have different temperaments, and it's about recognizing, look, certain things, certain things you just gotta let go. That's one of the things that I've really learned, that you can't win every battle, and every battle doesn't need to be won and lost. It's not like that. It's not like a zero-sum game where the battle you lose is the battle your children win, and vice versa. You're dealing with human beings and relationships, and human relationships are more complex than that. And you got to think, okay, that's happened. I'm just going to let that go. That I need to deal with, because that's really important. And it's just that recognition that you've got to you've just got to maybe our child will say something, and sometimes children will say things that don't really mean much. You just got to let it go. If you focus on that too much and say, why did you say that, it makes something that is a childish moment of childish moment of stupidity, maybe you make that into something that is bigger than that. And so you learn that after a while you still make mistakes, and you sometimes end up maybe responding to things that you shouldn't. But in the end, you just got to focus on what you need to do. And one thing I've realized is also that you've got to really recognize that raising children is not about the children; it's about you. It's like I say to parents that I have to remind myself of this as well, so that I apply it to my life as well, rather than just saying to other people. And raising children is the biggest personal developmental opportunity there is, because your children are, to a large extent, a reflection of us. They are a reflection of who we are. And so our priorities, the things that we do, the modeling of our own behavior reflects on who they are. And I think that's really key to a lot of this. That it's not just about, and I think I spoke to a scholar about this a while back, and I've heard this from scholars down the line, and they say, look, the difference between sometimes we approach things as a process of ta'leem. You disseminate information to your children. You like, this is what you do, this is what you don't do. But actually, parenting is more about tarbiyah. It's more about the way we model behavior, and our children almost learn how to navigate life through the way they see us. And primarily, in terms of with our children, is how they see the interaction between us, their mother and father. That is sometimes the first glimpse of how to behave, how to work through a relationship, how to live life, and they see that, they observe that, and they almost mimic that, and actually that becomes the first blueprint for how they want to live their life when they in their future
Right.
marriage, when they become parents. And so, when I think back about my parents, sometimes you see glimpses of the way your parents raised you in the way you raise your children, and you think back, oh wow, I didn't realize how much of an imprint that will be upon me. And that's the good and the bad. And then you reflect on that and say, okay, take the good. And if that's not working, if that isn't really the best way to proceed with my own children, I've got to now make that decision to leave that behind me. I remember it's a simple thing. Like, I remember, my father used to always tell me, and he used to always tell me, look, whenever we used to always switch on the lights in the home, and we used to leave the room and the light will still be on.
Yeah.
And so obviously it's serving no purpose. It's it costs electricity costs, and we didn't know. We knew about costs and everything back then. So we'd leave the light on, and we'd go downstairs, for example. And my dad would say things like, "Look, why is the light still on? Yeah, I'm paying all these bills, and you're keeping these lights on." And then I remember at some point I used to say that to my children. And I think, oh, so I'm almost mirroring what my father said to me, to my own children. Like, I remember I once said to my son, "Oh, why is what is that? What is the purpose for that light being on in your room? Is it for the jinn? It's like, and I thought, wow, I'm just doing what my dad is doing. So sometimes you think that the impact of your own parents is not as great as it is, and you see glimpses of that in your own interaction with your own children and the way you raise your own children.
I think that point about children being a mirror, into our own selves is a very, very important concept when it comes to parenting, because if you don't realize that, then you don't really take that opportunity to allow those moments with your children to develop you, and for it to show you what you might need to work on. And that could be, things that you never would have expected, because in that arena of parenting, it is so unique in comparison to maybe the other types of challenges you would have faced prior to becoming a parent. In the arena of growing up in school, maybe there were certain things that happened that gave you certain bits of character development, and then in the workplace, and then as a parent. And so all of these areas, they can bring out different parts of you. And it would be a shame that somebody would go through this journey of parenting and never allow that to become a time for their own self-development. And but I guess what would you say is the way in which a father can take account of that? So how could they maybe become that self-aware to really notice those things, and then make an opportunity to maybe course correct, or to actually check one's character, and to correct that kind of behavior that they may have seen as flawed? Because as a father, you kind of have 1,000 things to worry about, right? You're providing for your family. You've got various different worries on your head. Maybe you're involved in community projects. Maybe even in terms of not just your own immediate family, but a lot of the men, they have to take care of other people, their sister or their brother or their nephews, their nieces, and they have a responsibility to provide over there as well in some families. So when you've got all of those things to think about, how does a father take a minute to just reflect on how his parenting is a reflection of his maybe flaws in his own character, and then where does he take the moment to then course correct and adjust those things?
No, I think it's a good question. I think in terms of issues will happen during the day in your interactions with your children, and I find this myself, where you can be very short with your children. You say something which is like born out of frustration. You're busy, and you end up taking it out on your children, or you just do something, or you say something which is not right. Yeah, it's not a reflection of the relationship you want to have with your children. Now, all of us know about that, and sometimes we let that pass. But actually, we need to almost sit on that moment and say, actually, what happened there? Why did I do that? And actually repair that. I think I remember our parents' generation, sometimes they didn't necessarily think that they needed to apologize to their children, and maybe they thought apologizing to children was a sign of weakness. That's not what you do. So you make a mistake with your children, even if whether you recognize it or not, you don't apologize. But actually, apologizing to your children is a huge. It's actually a very important step to take. It shows your children that when you make a mistake, you take responsibility for it, and you take steps to try and sort that out. Um, sometimes, sometimes your children, as they grow up, they may say things that about you that maybe sometimes they may say words that, if you reflect on, give you an indication of sometimes of hurt or of almost feedback around how they're being raised by you. And sometimes those could be just the words of a child, but it's important to reflect on those and say, okay, what is my son or daughter trying to tell me about my interaction with them, and how I should interact with them, and what I should do going forward. And I think those are glimpses that we need to take, even if however busy we are, as a believer that we want to be, we need to be introspective. Sometimes we have sometimes we engage in a conversation with somebody that may get heated, and then after that you think, what did I do wrong? What could I have changed in that interaction, that next time that won't happen? What do I do to correct that with the person maybe I was unjust with? So we've got to first of all recognize that we are. And I said that to parents, and I say that to myself, because I recognize it comes from my own experience, that none of us are perfect. Yeah, we all make mistakes. There's this idea sometimes of what the perfect parent is, and sometimes we look upon other families, and I think we look upon other families and think, oh, look how perfect they are. Look how they look at their. And I think sometimes our parents would say that to us, oh, look at their children are this and that, and why are not doing what you need to do. And actually, the reality is every family is perfect on the outside. But if you venture inside it, there'll be problems. The nature of human beings is that there'll be problems that in terms of in those relationships. But whether that comes out into the open or not, it's still there. It's simmering in private, behind closed doors. There's no such thing as a concept of a perfect parent. We all are already struggling to get to a position where we are just holding on to our children, trying to shape the values that they hold on to, make them proud Muslims who live Islam in a society which is encouraging them to lots of behaviors and values which are pulling them in different directions, and we're almost like trying to bring them back. Now, within all of that, I think it's recognizing that we are all struggling. I think sometimes when parents come together, and it's really important that we do this sometimes, when parents come together and say, look, I'm having this problem with my children, just by that one parent saying, I'm having that problem with my children, reassures others that, oh, you're having that problem with your children, so am I. And that shared experience of just saying, I'm having these problems, actually is a really important tool, because all of us think, oh, they're so perfect. Look at those people, they're so perfect, and I'm struggling. And actually, it's really important that we're almost authentic with other people and say, look, I'm struggling with this issue. I've got a daughter who I'm struggling in this area. My son is struggling in that area. I'm really trying to find ways of doing this and that. And that actually, that process helps others to recognize that we're all struggling. None of us are in a position where we can authoritatively say, do this and do that, and you'll end up with children like that. Yeah.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair for that advice. I think it's really, really important. But one other thing I wanted to ask you, in terms of you've got 5 children, there's a bit of a spectrum of ages. Now, when your eldest was youngest, and you think about the challenges that you had with your eldest, in terms of maybe things that it could either be in terms of parenting challenges, or even challenges that you felt like, it's a man, right? He's a young man. I'm guessing the eldest, all right? So when he was young, any challenges that you felt he would face in comparison to your youngest right now, what would you say is the difference between the challenges of when your eldest was small and how your youngest is at the moment?
Yeah, no, it's really, it's really different. They always talk about the issue of nurture and nature. Yeah. And they say what things affect the child, what comes almost naturally to a child in their disposition in terms of their I don't know, their mannerisms, or their approach to life, just whether they're outgoing or introverted.
Yeah.
What things are subject to nature or nurture. And the thing is, when my son was growing up, I was going out, going to work, coming back. Primarily, obviously, my wife, his mother, was raising him during the day. He's always been home educated as well, so that adds to the complexity to a certain extent. But my youngest daughter, yeah, she actually benefited from the pandemic a lot of the time, because I found the pandemic. A lot of people had different views about I really enjoyed it because you're at home with your children. You I was able to spend time, even obviously working from home. That was never a concept in my mind. What does it mean to work from home? Maybe from time to time in previous jobs I could work one day from home for a particular reason, but that was an exception. But the pandemic brought a different situation where now I was spending the whole day at home virtually. And so my youngest daughter grew up with a different reality where I was around much more, um, basically every hour of the day. And obviously for a child growing up now, my youngest daughter is nearly 6. That 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 built a different type of relationship with her than maybe with my other children. Although, I always tried whenever whenever I had to go to a circle or do something outside of the home, I would try and take my a child with me when I'd go to my to visit my parents. I'd take my children with me, and so I'd try to create that connection. But actually being in the home, working from home, being able to connect your children through the pandemic, I could see the difference between my relationship with my youngest daughter and with my older son. But the beautiful thing I found about relationships is that relationships are not over until they're over. Like, you can always, like, what you invest in the relationship um, adds to that relationship.
Yeah.
And sometimes I speak to fathers who say, "Look, my relationship with my son is so weak," and I say, "Look, it's never too late. Yeah, you could invest in a relationship even if you haven't had a relationship for years and years and years. You start what you invest in a relationship is what you get out of that. Um, like sometimes I've got to think about, okay, what are my relationships like with all of my different children, and I've got to think about it from not from a collective perspective, from an individual perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so, for example, when one of the challenges when your son goes up to maybe 16, 17, 18, there's almost a perception that we have that they no longer need us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now they're young men. They're out in the world. They're doing maybe a part-time job like my son is doing. They don't really need us, and they're quite they're quite on their own now. They're able to live without us now. The 6-year-old needs a lot more guidance, but actually although that may be what we think, that's not true. Our sons will always need our guidance to one extent or another. I remember recently I thought, okay, look, I need to do some activity with my son. Yeah, just something that one-to-one time. In the past, I would like maybe take him out for a meal, but actually, let's do something. But just the other day, I thought so I booked like some time on a badminton court, yeah, in a local leisure center, and we just started to go out and started to play badminton. And just that, just that 1.5 hours together, yeah, where we were struggling to actually knock the shuttlecock over the net,
Yeah.
and just having a laugh at how bad we are at badminton. That just that I helped to establish to strengthen my relationship with him, and it just drew home to me this idea that human relationships are what you put in. If you have a friend that you are in contact with, you're very close, and then for 5 years you don't really contact them. If you start to resume that relationship, it's almost as if it never ended. That gap didn't exist, and so it's about what you put in is what you get out. And I think I've learned that through experience with all of my children. What the time you spend with them is so important in developing that relationship. And yeah, that's I think that's so my youngest daughter, it's and it's difficult with the young, if you have lots of children. The youngest child, because I'm the youngest child in my family. I grew up with three older brothers, and so the youngest child is in a family structure, in a family dynamic, is different from everybody else. Like if you're the last child, yeah, and so to a certain extent you're treated slightly differently. So I remember my other children say, "Oh, you're that youngest, that my daughter, my youngest child, she's your favorite, isn't she?"
Yes.
And I said, "No, no." I said, I treat you all equally. I hate you all equally." I said, so I don't believe in inequality. So as a joke with them. But even then, the dynamic with the youngest child, that your youngest child is always seen as youngest child, even if that child is 16 years old. Oh, she's our youngest. Yeah. It's I think it's really strange the way that is. And if, for example, we ever had another child, then she would no longer be the youngest child, and that would change that dynamic.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting. It's like seeing things from that perspective is really interesting. But I've found, yeah, the biggest lesson over the years I've found is really about what it is about investing in that time with your children,
Yeah.
investing in that relationship, and it's never too late to do that either.
Yeah. That's really important. Yeah, never too late to do that. What can you tell us, or have you ever imagined, if you were not there, if you were not investing in that relationship with your children, what impact it could have uh, on yourself, on your children? Um, where would how would that really change those things that you're speaking about, and those the impact of your relationship with your children? How different would it be?
Yes, I really believe, yeah, unless you have a relationship with your children, you don't have influence over your children. So if, for example, your relationship with your children is distant, yeah, what you tell them, it doesn't have an impact. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really say to parents, and I've felt this personally in my relationship with my own children, is that if you aim to build your relationship with your children based upon love, yeah, you shower them with love. Yeah. And I love I'm not talking about love in the way traditionally we understand love, like love as in going out and making money and putting food on the table, clothes on their back, and the roof over their head. But actually love in the sense that they know that my father loves me. I tell them I love them. I kiss them. I hug them. I spend quality time with them. I show them in ways which are very direct that they're loved. Yeah,
Yeah.
if I can do that, yeah, then that translates into my influence over them. So when I say to them, I think you should do that or not do that, they're more likely to accept that. Yeah, and when you have a distant relationship with them, your ability even to convince them to do things, or to speak to them, or to advise them or guide them is severely diminished. What I found is before you advise, you build a relationship and you make that relationship strong. Otherwise, what you say would just be seen resented by them. Or why is my father telling me this? And I'm looking at a lot of the research around this area really backs that up. That children who don't have that relationship with their fathers are emotionally quite weak, and actually vulnerable to lots of different types of behaviors and lifestyles. Uh, Sometimes when I'm in those rare occasions when I'm in a school environment, or I'm in an environment where there's children and I'm speaking to them, there'll be maybe one or two children who will try and misbehave in a certain way, like they're almost attention-seeking behavior. You'll see that they're trying to seek attention. And I really believe those children are starved of love, especially from a father. And so for them, they're just trying to seek love in whatever way they can get it. Even if that be somebody's telling them off and say, behave yourself, that is at least some sort of attention. And attention is a form of love. Like if you give attention to a child, that's your way of conveying love. And if a child is starved of attention, that is a form of a child not feeling loved. And so I think so. I really think that that it's hugely important that we invest in a relationship with our children, and that investment in our relationship with our children will also translate into our influence with our children.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah. And I think that's an important point to kind of explore where this organization, SRE Islamic, started from, because I'm sure that it's rooted in this relationship that you wanted to have with your children, and what you expected, maybe what parents were losing when it came to their relationship with their child, or when their child then entered school, and what was happening in between there that their parent was unaware of. So I want to kind of get into why SRE Islamic really started, and I'm sure from what you've said, it's got an impact in terms of, or it's got a root within your own relationship with your children as well. So why don't you tell us when it started and why?
So I think so in 2008, a very long time ago. In 2008, I was my son was around 1.5. He was coming back to age 2, um, and so I initially got into this area because I became a governor in a school. Yeah, also my child wasn't at school at that time, but I wanted to like volunteer to be a governor at a school locally, so I volunteered to become a governor in a school just down the road from me. I was a governor for about 3.5 years. Um, and I was quite interested in education. Sometimes before it becomes a reality for you, you're not really concerned about it, and when it becomes a reality for you, you start to feel that concern. I remember I spoke to one brother who was saying that I knew about this SRE stuff back then, but I wasn't married, I didn't have children, so I didn't really care. Now I've
Right.
got children, I care about it, because that's the nature of us as human beings. So I realized that there was an issue. I was speaking to other parents and other governors that there was a real lack of awareness about the teaching of sex education in schools, what was being taught, what is statutory, what's not statutory. So I did a bit of research with some fellow governors. We wrote a little report around this, and actually even at that stage, we included elements of what would an Islamic sex education framework look like? Why is it important that Muslim parents discuss it with their children, and within which values frameworks do we discuss it? There's a very short booklet that we created around that. And I remember at that time, I had enrolled my child into the local school, just literally 5 minutes from my place. And actually, just by speaking to parents about what their own experiences with this subject at school was, my whole trajectory around education changed overnight. So with my wife, we discussed this and we said, okay, we're not going to send our children to state schools. And that may seem like an overblown reaction, but I was like, I don't want my children to be in that environment where this is taught in a way which is almost devoid of the values that I want my children raised with. We will teach it to our children at a time and a place that we want to within the context of our values. So we had a place, and he was just about to enter. We withdrew him and decided just to home educate. So we got in touch with and went to a home education center and network closer to us, and we decided to actually pay for that privilege of educating our child. And actually said, and then after that, we decided for all of our children that they'd be home educated. So all of our children from that moment on were home educated. None of them have been in state schools. And actually, sometimes parents say, "Look, the reality is not why are you talking about state education when your children are in that?" And I just feel as though, if I was in that situation, and not everybody has the capability of home educating, they don't have the capacity, they don't have the time, there's a number of different factors, and we are in much more of a privileged situation. I thank Allah that we are able to do that, but not everybody is able to do that. Not everybody is able to afford a Muslim school for their children. So I really feel as though, look, there's parents who are in that situation, and I think they need help to navigate those issues. Because if I was in that situation, I'd want to be given that support and help. So that I think that my own experience with my children and whether to put them into a school or educate them at home, that really, I think, drove me to do this work much more with parents, because recognizing that probably about 97, 98% of Muslim children are and probably will be for the future educated in all of the schools that we have around us. And so we almost have a responsibility to support those parents because that's the future of our community effectively as well.
Okay. And can you tell me in a nutshell, what are you doing at the moment with this organization, and how is it helping parents who have children who do attend school?
Is that a model I was working on before was that parents who had issues in school would contact me, and I'd advise them, I'd support them, I deliver presentations in different massages. Actually, I've seen the whole of the UK through this. There's parts of the UK I'd never visited before, and because of this, I've done presentations in probably most cities and towns throughout this country. And so I deliver presentations to raise awareness, to get parents to understand what the law states, and also give them some guidance on what do we do to try and instill these values within our own children, in terms of our conversations, in terms of the modeling of our behavior. How do we address this as a community? So initially I was working on this. Parent has a problem, they come to me and I would help them. And this was during evenings and weekends while I was outside of my day job. But now I've realized that, that model works to a certain extent, but it only gets to a small group of parents. The impact and the effect of that is very minimal. And so I just a few months ago, I launched this RSE Champions program, where the aspiration was to train up maybe about 200 people, 200 men and women, brothers, Muslims across the country, in every major city and town in this country, equipping them with the tools and the skills to be able to support their own communities in this issue. So that I did like a 7-module program based upon the key issues that I've faced with parents in schools, based upon supporting parents over the last 15 years. And I wanted them to almost bring that collective experience and just hand it over to them, giving them the resources, the presentations, everything that they need to sustain that work within their own communities. And I really feel that this is the way forward, because I go to an area, I deliver a presentation, I leave that area, and then nothing happens. It's like, what is the impact of that? And I really believe that having people in those local areas, creating awareness, advising parents, supporting parents, obviously they'll still be given support by me, but they effectively be running their own organizations in their local areas, and support parents in their local areas. And I think that is the way that we're going to get to the numbers of parents and support parents to navigate these issues in schools. And so that's one of my biggest programs. Another one that is on the back burner, but I need to get back to, is creating a maktab or madrasa curriculum that holistically deals with this issue, so that children who go to schools and then go to the maktab afterwards will understand these issues within the context of our values as Muslims. And so that's something I need to complete and then roll out to the makatib. There's also other smaller programs that we're doing in terms of trying to create an evidence base to bring together examples from parents across the country about what is going wrong in schools, what are the key problems happening in schools. Because at the moment there's a RSE review. We want to be able to give them first-hand evidence of what problems are happening in schools, with some recommendations for what needs to change. So those are the key things that we're doing at the moment.
Okay, alhamdulillah. It sounds like excellent work, but also it sounds very hard as well to roll some of these things across and to get our parents involved. What I want to do is to explore this, is to throw some myths at you. And I think if we start to kind of break down some of these myths, inshallah, it should help some of the fathers or parents that are listening to better understand how services that you're offering can be, I guess, of assistance and are quite important for the community, especially when many parents are thinking, what can I do? But there's also a lot of, I guess, misinformation surrounding that makes them feel like maybe they can't do anything. And I think given the work that you're doing, it's very clear that there are ways that parents can be involved. So I think one myth is this whole change in sex and relationships education, is it done on purpose? Is there some sort of are the schools evil? Do they want to change our children, or do they want to take our children away from us. I think this is one of the you know, problems that parents have when they're looking at this is, you know, it's being done on purpose, it's being engineered, and because of that reason, you know, the school is evil and there's no reason to work with them, I guess. So could you answer that for us?
Yeah, so I think definitely schools aren't evil. They're not looking to take your children away, but there are majority of teachers come from a very left wing background, come from a background where these type of values, the LGBTQ values, the acceptance of almost this is who you are, is more pronounced because it comes from that particular values perspective. And because there's very few rules around what a teacher can and cannot do in this area, teachers are imposing their own personal values on children. And it's almost like, you know, it's the mentality that fueled colonialism. Yeah, that we are trying to almost civilize the barbarians, the savages. Yeah, and you know, even colonialists who invaded countries and killed people justified that because they thought that they were doing good. Yeah, we are fulfilling our responsibility. You know, this whole idea of the white man's burden. Now,
Yep.
this same supremacist approach that came about as a result of colonialism is the same thing that's fueling this whole culture war, where teachers are thinking, look, those children come from a religious background. Maybe in this country, religion is seen as like very regressive and backward. We're trying to almost free these people from that restrictive view about life. We're trying to get them to think about equality and diversity. And who doesn't like equality and diversity? And so, inadvertently, they are almost giving this view that there is only one view. There's a default view around these issues. And if you don't follow that default view, then we need to almost help you to get to that stage and civilize you. And if you were to speak to them as teachers in that sense, they say, no, we're not doing that. The reality is that anybody who believes in a particular worldview will seek to convince others of that worldview. Yeah, I believe in this, and but the thing is, they don't believe that they're doing that. But when I hear from parents who say, look, my child went to school and said, my mother's going to have a baby boy, I'm going to have a baby brother, and really excited, telling the teacher, and the teacher says, how do you know that baby's going to be a boy? Yeah, when he grows up, he can decide whether he's a boy or a girl. And when teachers are involved in this ridiculous, um, 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 uh, this whole ridiculous idea that biological sex isn't a real thing, and they have this term gender, which is you can be whoever you feel you are, then we're going to get these strange views, the strange clashes taking place in schools. And when parents say, look, I'm a Muslim parent, I have some rights under the Equality Act. I have the right to teach my children my own values within the framework of the law. Teachers are like, why should we pay attention to your religion and faith? That's not as important as sexual orientation or gender identity. They're not as important because they've created a hierarchy. So I think there isn't like this plan to like almost change your children, but inadvertently that's what they're doing when they're saying that these values are values that your children need to embrace, being in a liberal society.
Okay, that's clear. Another myth, I guess, that a lot of Muslim parents have is we have no power. This is kind of being pushed down and it's being orchestrated in a way in which we cannot be involved in this at all and we have no say. Is that true?
Yeah, and I think this apathy is one of our biggest dangers. The reality is that there's far too many parents who feel so disempowered by the environment that they feel as though what they do matters little. And this is dangerous. This is really, really dangerous. This is one of our biggest problems in our community, where you have people that, there's lots of things. And I'm a big, I oppose this idea of parents, spreading a lot of these WhatsApp videos around. This is happening in this school. This is happening in this library, because sometimes it really disempowers parents because they think, sometimes people spread it because they want people to know about the reality. But sometimes we we get the impression that the environment is stacked against us, that we just can't do anything about it, and that's very disempowering. What parents need to realize is you need to fight for your children, literally fight for your children this day and age, where there's films and TV programs and your children's friends and schools and social media. All of these are sometimes pulling your children away from the values that we want them to hold. And so we are in that fight because we are trying to ensure our children get to Jannah and stay and avoid Jahannam. This is the reality of our predicament. So recognizing, okay, whatever the situation is, no matter how difficult that situation is, the believer looks at the situation and says, within all of these issues, what is it that I have the ability to do, and what would I be accountable for? And looking at those issues, you say, okay, that means I do this, yeah. And if I do this and I strive in for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will facilitate a means by which I attain success, no matter how difficult the situation is or how much I feel the situation is stacked against me. And I think it's that mindset that's the main thing. If we believe that we can't do anything, we won't do anything. If we believe we have no influence over our children, we'll never have influence over our children. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You believe that the situation is out of control, and therefore you end up doing nothing, and then the situation is out of control. So I think we've got to say, okay, in schools, there's a huge amount of flexibility that we can, that the school has around teaching these subjects. But sometimes parents don't approach the school and say, look, we are concerned about this, we want some changes made. And then the school just does whatever they want to do without parents inputting into that. And then we ask, why isn't the parent responding to us? Because we're not approaching the schools in a way in which we're going to be able to achieve change. This whole RSE Champions program is about supporting people to educate parents about what areas are changes possible, and navigating through those changes to ensure that we bring changes into schools. So I think really we've got to say that at the end of the day, what is it that we want our children to become? Yeah. Always have a picture in your mind. My child is 18 years old or 19 years old or 20 years old. What is it that we want them to be? Yeah. And one of the things that I see also is sometimes parents have a very a view about what they want the children to be that is just that is no different from the average person in society. And as Muslims, we have a distinct view about what our children to be. Sometimes I see conversations happening on Facebook. Somebody says, look, I'm moving into this area. I'm looking for a good school for my children. Can you tell me which schools are good and why they're good? And they'll say, oh, this school is educationally good. That school has good facilities. That school is within good range of transport links. But nobody says, oh, that school is pushing LGBT values in a really tough way. I would really avoid that. Or that school doesn't allow Muslim children to pray. I would avoid that school. So the consideration is very secular. The consideration is academic success or something that is linked to the dunya. And right. So we've got to almost recalibrate our approach to. Of course, we want our children to succeed in life. There's nothing wrong if our children become successful in life. Absolutely good, excellent. But you don't sacrifice that for the sake. You don't sacrifice their akhirah for the sake of our children getting the best marks in GCSE or being the best brain surgeon in the world, but they don't believe in God. You know, it's the idea. The issue is that what are our priorities? Yeah, and so I think when I say we've got to fight for our children's iman, I don't mean that in a way to scare parents. I mean that is the reality. You know, we've been told in many hadith that that a person will go to sleep as a believer and wake up as a disbeliever. That holding on to Islam, there'll come a time where holding on to Islam would be like holding on to hot coals, hot embers. So we've got to, all of these things have to inform the way we understand the challenges that we face today and take appropriate steps, because at the end of the day, these are our children and we want the best for them. And wanting the best for them means that, okay, they succeed in this life, but also they lead us to Jannah and we become companions in Jannah. as that overall objective.
Well, somebody may turn around to you, Yusuf, and say, well, I can get cancelled for speaking about these kind of things openly, right? What about me? What about my career? What about my reputation? I'll potentially get slandered and online, and the society, friends, family will be against me if I say anything about these topics. What would you say to that type of person?
I think first of all, there's ways of saying things. Yeah, ways of saying things. If you say things in a way which comes across as I want to destroy all people who are LGBTQ. That saying irresponsible things is one thing, but saying things in a way which reflects our values and is measured is another matter. And there's the there's thousands of people who speak about these things and critique these things every day, and they don't get cancelled. Sometimes the fear of things is so debilitating, but the reality is not what the fear suggests the situation will be. So the fear will say to you, if you do that, this will happen. But actually, most of the time, it doesn't happen. And the problem is, for far too long, the fact that as a community we haven't talked about this has led to Muslim children being so confused about this. Some of them start to say, "I'm a girl, I want to be a boy," or some of them say, "I identify as gay." And so we've got to think about what are the potential consequences of us not speaking about these issues in the long term for our own children and children in our community. And I think, the reality is that this idea of being cancelled has become a thing that some people have used to stop people speaking about certain things. But, you think about it, lots of that over the last maybe year now, there's been a greater degree of people speaking about this and critiquing it. And actually, to a certain extent, I spoke about this the other day, that the LGBTQ lobby has overplayed its hand. They pushed for more rights. They pushed for more rights. And then they pushed so much. And people have started saying, you're asking, why are you asking for this? To what extent does your ability as a man to identify as a woman then take away the right of a woman to have women-only spaces? Yeah, women in domestic violence situations are being forced then to allow a man who's dressed as a woman to enter our premises just on the grounds that they identify as women. How is that fair? How is that acceptable? So there's become a greater acceptance that there's a problem in society now. Whether society is going to be able to navigate that, given the fact that there are no clear moral objective truths which underpin what people consider to be accepted or not, is another matter. But actually, the ground to speak out about these issues in a way which is measured is far more open than it was even a year ago. So I think don't fear being cancelled. That in the workplace, even in the workplace, we talk about people in the workplace and what you can do if you're working in the workplace. Now, there's things the things you can push back against. If you say, look, people can live their life however they want to live. Yeah, I'm not trying to interfere in the right of people to live their lives how they want. But as a Muslim, I have certain values, I have certain beliefs, I have certain things that I can and cannot do. And if you're asking me to take part in a pride event at work, that's something I can't do. I'm not going to interfere in your ability to do that. And I'll work with any colleague, no matter what their background or whatever label they have. I'm fine with that. But there are certain things that I can and cannot do. And if you speak to your manager in that way, who's going to say, "Oh, you're bigoted, you're going to be cancelled, or I'm going to fire you"? We can have these conversations if we voice it, or if we communicate it in a way which is measured and is faithful to what we believe in.
Okay, alhamdulillah. And what advice would you give to somebody who, is this? I would say there's two different people in this scenario. So one is somebody who feels strongly about trying to bring change in this dynamic and ensure that schools are teaching these things in an appropriate way, in a way in which is sensitive to Islamic values. And this person, they are not involved in schools, i.e. they don't have a child in that school. Maybe they're not even a parent. They're just somebody who is passionate about this. And then you've got somebody else who is a parent who does have their child in that school, and that parent, although they feel that this is important, they feel afraid that this is obviously maybe it's going to damage their child's experience in the school. Maybe, you know, by that parent speaking out, it's going to affect the relationship that the teachers have with the child. So you have kind of these, I guess, these two dynamics when there's two people that really want change to happen, but one person maybe doesn't have the access because they're not involved in the school at all. The other person has the access but feels afraid. What could these two people do to try and bring about the positive change that they want to see?
Yeah, so some of the RSE champions don't have children. And some of the people who volunteer their time to support communities, they don't have children. They may have nephews and nieces. They may have people in their wider family that are children, but they don't have children themselves, and that's absolutely fine. That they realize that actually this is something greater than my own children. So a lot of the RSE champions are being trained up not to support their own children, although that could be something that they get better at through the process. But their main objective is to help other people's children. One thing is that that parent in that school, you know, that parent in that school needs to be supported with other parents to know they're not alone. You know, one thing we say is that, look, if a parent in that school is supported, but also then a group of parents other than them. So if there's 40 or 50 parents, the school can't do anything to those people's children. If there's one parent who is on their own, who's fighting that battle, then that parent could be sidelined. Oh, you're the only parent who's got concern. All these other parents are happy with what we're teaching. You're the troublemaker. And they can be sidelined, they can be labeled and ignored. So what we're trying to do is create a situation where parents across the school understand that they have to work together. Now, the reality is some parents will do more than others. Some parents will just be on the sidelines, and whenever they need to help to back up those other parents who are taking the lead, they'll do that. But essentially, there's always going to be one or two parents that are taking the lead and supporting the other parents. But I think the situation now is that parents are feeling less and less scared about approaching schools on these issues. The more we make it a normal action, the normal action is that you are seeking change in schools, you are engaging with schools, you are being involved in schools. The more we make it normal, the more that one parent will feel less isolated. But essentially, the other parent can support that other parent to raise awareness amongst other parents, to give them some clear actions to reach the end objective that they want to. But I think the point we're saying is that that parent who's outside the school can't in any way take the lead or become like, I'm the one fighting for children in that school. It has to come from parents. That's the only way that change will happen. But I think, I think that dynamic is something, it is quite natural to occur. And sometimes we have parents who are supported by other people in their community who aren't parents, who are parents, who maybe no longer have children in that school. I spoke to an RSE champ yesterday. He said, "Oh, I don't have any children in the school. My youngest is 18, my eldest is 36." But I'm really interested in the future of our community and our children. That's why I'm getting involved in this. So I think there's a place for everybody in the community, no matter what their situation, to play a part in these solutions, in empowering parents and supporting parents, in educating parents, in raising awareness. And the key thing is that we raise awareness so that it's not just one parent in the school. There's many parents who are working together to try and seek that change in that school,
Inshallah. How can people get involved with RSE champions?
Well, we're obviously we're nearly at the end of training up people. So obviously you can contact us, and the next time we open up that, which I'm not sure where it be, but next time we open up that opportunity, you can take part. We're hoping that if we can train up people fully in different areas, and they can also they could be like lead trainers in different areas who have been trained to a higher level, that they can actually then deliver training to other people. So obviously within a particular area, imagine you're in Birmingham and there's maybe 20 people who are RSE champions. It may be over time that may get down to 15 because people have commitments, new commitments in their life. Oh, I can't commit now. So naturally, they might go down. So they need to recruit more people, and then we all have almost super trainers in those areas who then can train other people up. So you can join us. You're another 10 people will train you up to be able to join this group of RSE champions. So I think in terms of, if you want to support this work in any way, just contact me, Yusuf, YUSUF at SREislamic.org. If you've got any ideas or suggestions or anything that you think that you can contribute to this work, even if it's not even in the RSE champions area, then please do contact me. I'm always looking for people who can offer suggestions and actually help to support the community in these areas, inshallah.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair for joining us, Yusuf. It's been very, very informative. Jazakallah khair.
Barakallah. Assalamu alaikum.